ESPN's Elle Duncan is set to step in as the new face of Netflix's sports division. She's going to be the face of Netflix sports, a woman. Now, for those of you who don't know who Elle Duncan is, I don't blame you because in the grand scheme of things, she's insignificant. But she's this chick. I did a video on her not too long ago.
And here we go.
Laymans Journal, Chapter 234. When I was coming up, ESPN was a channel for men. Its focus was sports and only sports, and they didn't care about being inclusive. They were all about games, highlights, post-game interviews, and breaking news. And it was great. It was a large part of my adolescent years. Waking up every morning at 6 a.m. catching the early edition of SportsCenter, and ending my night the same way, with the late night edition of SportsCenter. Then around 2001, PTI, or Pardon the Interruption, came along, and it was hosted by Tony Kornheiser and Mike Wilbon. And it was the first show of its kind, because it wasn't about the game, it wasn't about the athletes, it was about the media personalities that covered the game. And every day it was a full hour of them giving their opinions and arguing with each other. It operated like a political debate show in that regard, but for sports. And its purpose was to mimic the kinds of conversations that were taking place on sports talk radio, which was very popular at the time. And to say that it was a success is an understatement. It completely revolutionized the way sports was covered, and it gave birth to numerous copycats, like Around the Horn, IMAX, and of course First Take, which was the first show to mainstream the genre. Then in 2016, we got Undisputed with Skip Bayless and Shannon Sharpe, with Shannon Sharpe becoming the first major sports pundit who was a retired athlete. And now it's evolved to where we are today, where these sports shows have full-blown panels of 4 or 5 personalities, and they're all spouting their opinions. However, it did set a dangerous precedent, because the creators of the genre, Tony Kornheiser and Mike Wilbon, were not professional athletes. They were journalists by trade. They never played the game at a high level, and due to the success of the genre, it legitimized their opinions. It proved that audiences didn't care if the people discussing sports topics were experienced in the topics they were speaking on. They just needed to have a hot take that people could argue over. And unfortunately, it paved the way for women who didn't belong in the discussion. Because if an ignorant little like Skip Bayless, who was nothing more than a JV basketball player, can give his ill-informed opinion, then why can't a woman? If that dumbass could get on the air every day and say that LeBron James is trash and Tim Tebow is a football god, then why can't a woman give her opinion? If he can give his dumbass takes based on a lack of experience, then certainly a woman who knows nothing about sports can do the same. And for the past 10 years, that's exactly what ESPN has been pushing. Women no smarter than Skip Bayless speaking on topics they know nothing about because they never played. And over the years, we've had some terrible personalities come across their platform. Women like Jemele Hill, Molly Qerim, Sage Steele, and of course, the queen of all anti-black male misandry, Malika Andrews. Again, none of whom are qualified nor understand the nuances of the sports topics they speak on, but they do it because that's what ESPN encourages them to do. Because if an idiot like Skip Bayless can do it, then why can't they? And it's become insufferable. It's gotten to the point that aside from the sports broadcasts, I no longer watch ESPN. I no longer begin in my day with the network. And if one of those DEI-inspired ladies are in the booth calling the game, I turn the sound off. And if they're on the sidelines giving updates, I hit the mute button. Because I refuse to allow someone who knows less than I do to explain what's going on. Because I played the game of football. I understand the nuances of the game. And none of the ladies or former ladies of ESPN understand the concepts. For example, this lovely lady right here, Elle Duncan. She made a foolish statement this past weekend. She was a part of a panel where they were discussing the future of Miami Dolphins quarterback Tua Tagovailoa, who recently suffered his 4th concussion during a football game against the Buffalo Bills. And whether or not Tua, at just 26 years old, should consider retirement. Whether or not the sport he loves is worth the damage that is causing his brain. And it led to a back and forth between she and Stephen A. Smith.
Here's the deal.
When I sit up there and I go to work every day, and I'm not a football player, but when I go to work every day, there are sacrifices that I make as a father all the time. I'm not around my daughters as much as I would like to be. I'm not with my family as much as I would like to be. Sometimes they resent it and what have you. I don't care. And you know why I don't care? Because I grew up starving. And as a result of that, anything that I do to ensure the well-being of my family moving forward, even in the event that I'm not around, as selfish as that may be, I'm willing to do it because I knew what it was like to grow up with nothing. These football players make those decisions every single day as men. Provide, protect. That's our number one priority. That's how most of us think. And that plays a role into the kind of decisions men make, even when they're deemed selfish, foolish, ill-advised, or whatever. It comes with it when you're a man.
You're goddamn right.
Listen, as someone who is a woman who has 2 scars that go from hip to hip because I've had 2 C-sections in an effort to provide for my family and create a family for my family, I understand sacrifice.
What the fuck are you talking about?
A black woman in this country whose mortality rates are incredibly high. I understand making sacrifices and trying to mitigate risk when it comes to your family, expanding your family and protecting your family. All I am simply imploring is that anyone in Tua's corner, someone that truly believes and loves Tua, is having a real conversation with him right now about what quality of life looks like. And we all face an existential crisis at some point in our lives. You host a podcast called The Pivot, and all of us at some point have got to make a turn from the thing that we were defined for our entire lives. If we are surrounded by people that love us and can help us get to the conclusion that there is life after this, as dark and troublesome as it may be, as much as you sacrifice to get here, I'm just hoping someone, it ain't me, I got no dog in this fight, and I am not audacious enough to ask him. I'm hoping someone in that family, someone in his corner that truly loves him, is asking him to sit down and think long and hard about whether he wants to keep doing this.
Yeah, it doesn't get any dumber than that. And we're going to talk about it. So, let's get it. First, let me say I agree with Miss Duncan in spirit. Tua should retire. And football, as great as it is not worth losing your cognitive abilities. And I understand that Tua is still young, but at this rate, he's headed towards an early case of CTE, or dementia. And his concussions haven't been mild, they've been brutal. Take this hit right here he suffered against the Cincinnati Bengals last year. Look at the way he loses control of his hands. You can literally see in real time the damage he's causing his brain. So I do agree with Miss Duncan. He should consider retirement. In fact, he should retire. However, Stephen A. Smith makes a great point that I can't argue against. He says that football is a gladiator sport. The men who play it understand the cost, and they're willing to pay it for the betterment of their families. And certainly, their family members don't like it. They'd rather have him around and in his right state of mind. But just like he says, he doesn't care. Because men like Tua have a warrior's mentality, and their children are not going to starve or suffer lack. And that's part of manhood, that's part of masculinity, specifically for men like Stephen A. Smith who grew up in poverty. They don't want the same for their children. Now, while Stephen A. is making this point, I'm watching Elle Duncan's expression. And even though she appears to be expressionless or even smiling at one point, I could sense that she was seething on the inside, that there was some pent-up frustration against what Stephen A. was saying. And even in the moments where she appears to wince, the director quickly cuts away from her face so as not to show it. But even still, I was able to recognize it. Specifically the portion when he expounds on what it means to be a man.
These football players make those decisions every single day as men. Provide, protect. That's our number one priority. That's how most of us think. And that plays a role into the kind of decisions men make, even when they're deemed selfish, foolish, ill-advised, or whatever. It comes with it when you're a man.
Masculinity and sacrifice. That really set her off. And it reminds me of some statements made by the late Kevin Samuels, where he spoke about the low-boiling contempt that black women like Elle Duncan have for black men like Stephen A. Smith. They see us as natural enemies or rivals, and are inclined to challenge us and push back against everything we say. And when I look at Elle Duncan, responding to the great point that Stephen A. Smith is making, I can tell that she hates him for that. Because even though she has the winning argument, his presentation and reasoning is much better, and it's making her look stupid. In her mind, she's thinking he's mansplaining to her. And I'm sure that makes her feel left out because she's at a table that was created for men, speaking on a sport that is only played by men. So she's not qualified to speak on this topic, and the eloquency of his argument reinforces that fact. But more importantly, because she's not a man. It's not within her to understand the kind of self-sacrifice that Stephen A. is talking about. And that kind of self-sacrifice is something that is exclusive to men. Women also have a form of self-sacrifice, but it looks different when it comes from women. It's not as extreme as getting your head bashed in every Sunday, or like what Stephen A. Smith was talking about, that he works so hard to provide for his family that he barely sees them. Whereas most women want to get out of the workforce when they start a family, so they can spend more time with them. Whereas men, by contrast, would rather work harder to provide for them. But because she's a strong, educated, accomplished woman, she can't concede the argument. She has to say something back, even if it doesn't make sense, just to prove that she belongs at the table, that she can have this conversation. So she foolishly compares having 4 major concussions to giving birth, to having a C-section. And the first thing she says is, as a woman. Now, I've been observing and participating with debates with lovely ladies like Elle Duncan for a very long time. And whenever you hear that phrase,
as someone who is a woman,
oh shit, here we go again,
I want you to know that something stupid is going to follow. Specifically when you're speaking on a topic that a woman can't understand. You're going to hear an emotional argument, and it lets you know that logic has officially left the building because something dumb is about to be said. And Miss Duncan doesn't disappoint.
As someone who is a woman who has 2 scars that go from hip to hip because I've had 2 C-sections in an effort to provide for my family and create a family for my family.
Now, I need somebody to explain to me how giving birth is a form of provision and protection. How does that work specifically? I'd never heard a man say, because my wife had a baby, it protected me. Because my wife had a C-section, it gave us provision. Now maybe she's trying to compare the battle scars of having a C-section are similar to a concussion, but even still that doesn't make sense. And I'll come back to that point later. But everybody on that panel knows she's talking stupid, even Molly Querim, that based on what she's saying, she shouldn't be speaking on this issue. But nobody can tell her that, especially Ryan Clark and Stephen A. Smith, who happen to be men, because she's a woman. And it's ESPN's policy to let women like her speak, regardless of if they're making any sense. Because if Skip Bayless can do it, why can't they?
It's my turn!
And then she goes on to play the race and gender card.
A black woman in this country whose mortality rates are incredibly high.
Hell!
Shut up! Shut up! Shut up!
Again, she's talking about giving birth and how that's supposed to be equal to provision and protection. But again, I do agree with her in spirit, because later in her rant, she finds focus and she begins to talk about quality of life.
All I am simply imploring is that anyone in Tua's corner, someone that truly believes and loves Tua, is having a real conversation with him right now about what quality of life looks like.
And that made sense to me, because Tua is not a random football player. He's a quarterback, a superstar quarterback, and he's very rich. He's made enough money for his family. He can provide for them for the rest of their lives, including his grandchildren. So he's fulfilled the provision portion of being a man. There's no financial necessity for him to continue playing. And that's why I agree with her in spirit. But all this stuff about being a woman, a black woman, and having a C-section, and how that equates to having 4 major concussions doesn't make any sense.
I understand making sacrifices and trying to mitigate risk when it comes to your family, expanding your family and protecting your family.
I get it. I understand the history of the cesarean section and understand that in the past, millions upon millions of women have lost their lives giving birth. But that was 300 years ago. And in the past 100 years, the procedure has been stabilized and is now considered a safe, routine procedure, one that many women do electively. So it's not like a woman is risking her life necessarily, or her quality of life, by opting to have a C-section. Because at the end of the day, it's a surgery, it's a medical procedure. A concussion is an injury to the brain, one that many people don't recover from. You see, Elle Duncan is 41 years old, and even though she's had 2 C-sections, It hasn't affected her life in any way, and she'll continue living on for the next 40 to 50 years with a great quality of life. As for Tua, he's on a path towards early dementia. Again, I'm a football fan, and even though I don't have CTE, I've seen the devastating effects it's had on the players that I grew up watching. Many of these men talk about having involuntary mood swings, hallucinations. Some even hear voices in their head, telling them to hurt themselves or their family members. And as a result, they end up taking their own lives. A C-section doesn't compare to any of that. And that's why Miss Duncan, even though I agree with her, doesn't make any sense. But overall, this is the sad state of sports talk in America, and why I can no longer tolerate it, especially on networks like ESPN. Because it's littered with women like Elle Duncan, making bizarre statements that only a woman that doesn't watch sports would make. And it angers me as a man because it's just another example of how men no longer have their own spaces. How everything that we once had is now gender inclusive. And it's not just sports. We're talking about video games, the MCU, the barbershops, fire departments, the military, the factories. Everything has been retrofitted for a woman's sensibilities and presence. Now, women have their own spaces. They have their own gyms. They have their own entertainment networks. They have the church, even their own movies. I can't tell you how many times I've seen advertisements for films where the producer or director or the leading star will proudly proclaim this isn't a movie for men. So they're allowed to delineate. They're allowed to segregate and have their own thing. But men don't have that luxury. And that's why I no longer watch ESPN. It's no longer a space for men. Instead of getting sports and highlights and interviews and breaking news, you routinely get these lectures from women like Elle Duncan telling us about what it means to be a woman while we're trying to discuss football. So anyway, I'm going to close things right here. That's Elle Duncan. That's who Netflix is making the new face of their sports division. Yeah. This is more of Elle Duncan.
In Florida and across other states as well that are targeting legislation happening in Florida and across other states as well that are targeting our LGBTQI plus communities. Many of our colleagues here at
Who is our? These aren't my communities. Who does she mean by our?
ESPN have planned and organized a walkout that will be happening at 3 p.m. Eastern today. And to be honest with you, we thought we were going to come here today and really celebrate a sport that has meant so much and done so much, including for...
Then do that. Talk about the sports. Why are you talking about politics? I'm trying to get the scores for the NCAA women's tournament, and you want to talk to me about a protest for LGBTQs?
So many in the LGBTQI plus communities, but we understand the gravity of this legislation and also how it is affecting so...
We don't care. I don't care. This is a sports network. So number one, this is a sports network with a woman as an anchor. That's foul number one. But now she's going to make this about the LGBTQIA plus community. That's foul number two.
So many families across this country, and because of that, our allyship is going to take a front seat. And with that,
your allyship. This is a sports network.
We're going to pause in solidarity.
This is the face of Netflix's sports division. This is the face of Netflix's sports division. Who the hell is running Netflix? Why do they think this idiot is a good idea? Where is her fan base? Who out there is saying that Elle Duncan really adds to the bottom line? I wouldn't be watching sports if it were not for her commentary on childbirth and the LGBTQIA community. Her talking about having cesareans and pro-gay legislation is why I watch football, why I watch basketball. Who's saying that? Who cares what comes out of her mouth? I'm gonna keep it real with her, real with you. If Elle Duncan disappeared, like Thanos snapped his fingers, and I never saw her again, first of all, I wouldn't freaking notice. But most importantly, I wouldn't care. And neither would you. But more importantly, I'd be glad. Because she wouldn't be running the Netflix sports division. How out of touch can you be to put this goofball in charge of anything? Who's advising you? Who's telling you you've got to have Elle Duncan? Or people won't watch sports? Who's thinking that? Who's saying that? This woman is a failure, yet she's moving upward. People talk about women not having advantages and women having disadvantages and all that stuff, but where do you see a man failing upward like this? This woman has no success to speak of in her life, yet she's getting promoted to a bigger office. Based on what? Based on what? No straight male sports fan asked for Elle Duncan, and Netflix is going to pay her a hefty fee to come in there and muck things up.
Now streaming on Patreon. Layman's Journal Chapter 271. If you've been following my content for a while now, you'd know I'm fascinated with human nature, specifically in regards to gender, and how differences in gender determine our behavior. But aside from gender, I also study group dynamics, and how they can influence human nature, and how the people we associate with largely determine the decisions we make. Because humans, just like cattle, wolves, and schools of fish, are pack animals, meaning we prefer to live and function within groups. That's why we live in cities, have circles of friends, and seek out relationships with the intent of creating families. And it isn't learned behavior, it's instinctual. Studies have shown babies, shortly after they're born, require human touch. Researchers don't know why, but physical touch in the form of affection plays a critical role in infant development and survival, which is why doctors, as soon as a child is born, lie them on their mother's chest, and why fathers often take off their shirts when holding their children for the first time. It's something about that skin-to-skin contact that helps a child thrive. But women, more so than men, need the group dynamic. They can't live without a pack environment. Men, on the other hand, are more like lions. We're born into a pack, and we enjoy the social familiar structure. But we have our bachelor years. It's a season in our lives where we, as men, have to go it alone. Like young male lions who come of age, we leave the pride of our families, move away from our parents' homes, get our own place, grow and establish ourselves as men. For the most part, we ignore women during that time, so we can hone our skills, chase the bag, and improve ourselves mentally and physically before returning to create our own pride or family. But not women. Women stay within packs. Many move out of their parents' homes like men, but they stay close to family and seek out social groups. They don't leave to go through seasons of isolation to self-improve. They focus their energy on maintaining or growing social bonds. Because women are the ultimate survivors. They don't have the strength that men have to survive in the wild, yet somehow they do it at higher rates than men, because they, more so than men, understand the concept of safety in numbers. They know there's protection and comfort within the group, and they will do anything to stay within said group. Even if the group is toxic, their desire to belong and fear of not fitting in supersedes the desire for righteousness if it requires being alone. This is why the overwhelming majority of cult members tend to be women, why social media personalities and pastors, in spite of being exposed on multiple occasions, still enjoy strong, loyal female followings. Because the women that follow them can't live outside of the group dynamic. And we see a great example of that in the film Set It Off. It's the story of a young woman, a beautiful young woman named Stoney, who joins a coven of chronically single black women on a bank robbing spree with deadly consequences. You've just seen a preview of my latest video, which you can watch now in its entirety, uncensored and without obstruction, exclusively on Patreon. Again, that's patreon.com/Laymans Journal. Hope to see you there. I'm out.